I'd like to call today's special session, Wednesday, May 26, 2021 to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Volin.
Here.
Rosenbarger.
Here.
Scambolery.
Here.
Sims.
Here.
Flaherty.
Here.
Piedmont Smith.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. During the agenda summation, we will have approval of minutes this evening for April 15th, April 22nd, and April 29th of 2020. I do believe with corrections for April 15th of 2020 set of minutes. Then we'll move on to legislation for first reading and resolutions. That is Resolution 21-17, a resolution establishing an electronic meetings policy. Then we'll deal with matters having to do with council schedule before we adjourn for the evening. I believe we have minutes for approval. Councilmember Flaherty.
President Sims, I move that the minutes for April 15th, 2020, April 22nd, 2020, and April 29th, 2020 be approved.
Second.
Thank you. It's been properly moved to second that these minutes be approved. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Volin.
Yes.
Rosenbarger.
Yes.
Scambolery.
Yes.
Sims.
Yes.
Flaherty.
Yes.
Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Those minutes were approved 7-0. Now we'll move down to legislation for first reading and resolutions. Councilmember Flaherty.
Mr. President, I move that Resolution 21-17 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
Thank you. It's been properly moved to second that Resolution 21-7 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Sorry about that. Yes, Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Yes.
Scambolery.
Yes.
Sims.
Yes.
Flaherty.
Yes.
Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Volin.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. It's approved 7-0. Will the clerk please read?
Yes. Resolution 21-17, a resolution establishing an electronic meetings policy. The synopsis is as follows. This resolution adopts an electronic meetings policy pursuant to newly enacted state statutes concerning electronic meetings. The policy establishes the procedures that apply to a member's participation in a meeting by an electronic means of communication, as well as to the participation of the public and city staff members by electronic means of communication.
Thank you. Councilmember Flaherty.
Mr. President, I move that Resolution 21-17 be adopted.
Second.
Thank you. Resolution 21-17 been properly moved and seconded for adoption. Mr. Lucas, will you present this evening? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Council. Good evening. I'm Stephen Lucas, Council Administrator and Attorney, and tonight I am here to present Resolution 21-17, which, as the clerk just noted, would adopt a written electronic meeting policy that would apply to a council member's participation in meetings by any electronic means of communication. Such a policy is called for by a new state law that regulates how governing bodies like the council can conduct electronic meetings. Now, this new state law contains really two sets of rules that apply. One set when there is a declared emergency, as is currently the case, and another set of rules that would apply when we are not under a declared health emergency. I'll first go over the rules that would apply in the event that there is a declared emergency. And these rules would apply in the event either the governor or the executive of a political subdivision declares a disaster emergency, again, as we're currently under. The new state law includes these requirements, and these are actually mentioned in Section 6 of the policy, which you'll see contained in the resolution. But the requirements would include that members of the governing body are not required to physically attend a meeting during the duration of the declared emergency. Members can meet by any means of electronic communication as long as a quorum is present, either electronically or in person, and the public is able to simultaneously attend and observe the meeting, except this requirement would not apply to any executive sessions held by the council. So the public would not be able to or entitled to attend any executive sessions. Any memoranda kept for the meeting would have to include information about members present, how each member attended, whether in person or by an electronic means of communication, and also how the public was able to attend and observe the meeting. And any votes taken during such a meeting would have to be taken by roll call votes. If these rules sound familiar, it's because this is how we've essentially been operating over the past year. So while we are now under this new statutory scheme, there aren't really any changes that you'll experience during the duration of the public health emergency. We can continue to meet as we have been up until the health emergency is over. The bigger change and the next set of rules I'll go over would apply when we are not under a declared emergency. And I want to make this clear that these are minimum requirements that the statute spells out. And governing bodies, the council, are able to adopt rules that are more restrictive than these, but not less. And so the rules that are included in the resolution and that I'll go over here shortly essentially track the minimum requirements that state statute now includes. I also want to point out that these would apply both to the council and to any of the council's committees. Each committee is treated as a separate governing body, and I'll explain what that means in a bit more detail here shortly. The new requirements of the state statute, and again, this would apply when we are not under a declared emergency, would require or would say that a member who is not physically present at a meeting can participate electronically if all participating members of the governing body are able to simultaneously communicate with each other, and if the public is able to simultaneously attend and observe the meeting. And again, this wouldn't apply to any executive sessions of the council for the public to be able to attend and observe. At least 50% of the members of the governing body would have to be physically present at the meeting. So for council, that would mean 5 members. For council committees, it would obviously depend on the number of committee members, but we'd have to have at least 50% of the members physically present. A member could not attend more than 50% of the meetings in a calendar year via electronic means, nor could a member attend more than 2 consecutive meetings electronically, unless in either of those cases, the electronic participation is due to military service, illness or other medical condition, death of a relative, or an emergency involving actual or threatened injury to persons or property. A member attending electronically, and again, this would be when we are not under a public health emergency, can be counted for purposes of quorum, but in order to participate in any final action taken at the meeting, so any votes on legislation, any formal final action, the member must be both seen and heard. So both video and audio would have to be enabled. There are also certain types of actions where members are not authorized to participate in electronically. These are listed in the resolution, and I'll list them here now. Actions where members could not participate electronically would include attempting to take final action on adopting a budget, making any reduction in personnel, initiating a referendum, establishing or increasing a fee or penalty, using the eminent domain authority of the city, or establishing, raising, or renewing a tax. So these are all types of actions where for a member to be able to participate, that member would have to be in attendance in person at the meeting. Again, for any meeting where a member attends electronically, the memoranda kept for that for those meetings would have to include information about which members were present, how each member attended, whether it's in person or electronically, and again, how the public was able to attend and observe the meeting. All votes taken during a meeting where any member participates electronically would have to be taken by roll call vote. And just a quick note, in the event of a technology failure that would disrupt either a council member's communication during the meeting or a member of the public from attending and observing, would not affect the ability of the council to conduct the meeting or to take action as long as the sum of the members physically present and any other members participating electronically still satisfied any quorum and voting requirements. So if a member drops off, as long as there's a quorum present and any other voting requirements are met, the meeting can proceed. I mentioned the rule regarding participation in more than 2 meetings in a row. I know when this resolution was previewed at the work session this last Friday, there was a question on whether that restriction applied to council meetings, council committee meetings, or some combination of the two. That restriction would apply to each governing body individually. So participating electronically in 2 council meetings in a row would not prohibit that same individual from participating in 2 council committee meetings in a row, or for that matter, any other board or commission throughout the city that the member serves on. And so I'm happy to clarify if there's any more questions on that. So those rules that I just went over are taken fairly directly from the new state statute. Those are contained in sections 1 through 5 of the policy that you'll see in the resolution. Sections 7 and 8 in the resolution state that both members of the public and city staff are also able to participate in meetings via electronic means. These sections are not included in the state statute, but these provisions reflect how the council has been operating for well over a year. For members of the public, the policy states that an individual can participate. So beyond just attending and observing, it states that an individual can participate in the council meeting subject to the council's rules for making public comment, which would apply both to members of the public wishing to participate in person or electronically. And in the case of city staff, the policy states that the presiding officer for the meeting in question has the discretion to determine if there's a need for any staff member to physically attend a meeting and require that staff member be physically present. And again, these are provisions that are not required by the new state law, but that reflect how the council seems to have been operating for the past year. Just a few final notes. I don't know that any member of the administration is on the meeting, but this policy was shared with the mayor's office, with the legal department, and Corporation Counsel Philippa Guthrie wanted me to share that the administration has reviewed the resolution, that they are fully supportive of it, and that they intend to make sure that other boards and commissions throughout the city have such a policy in place as soon as possible that aligns with this one as much as possible. I know some boards, I believe the Utility Service Board may have even acted already to adopt a policy. Just as a point of information, I know that the county commissioners have also adopted a policy that essentially looks like the policy you have in front of you. Just one more note on the policy and returning to in-person meetings. I do know that, I'll correct myself, Rick Dietz is here on the meeting tonight. And I wanted to mention that the city's IT department has worked diligently to help prepare for a return to in-person meetings, and especially to hybrid meetings where we may have members participating both in person and electronically, as well as members of the public participating in those different ways. And Rick Dietz is here tonight to speak to the several upgrades that they've been working on in council chambers to prepare for such meetings, and may be able to talk to the work that he and his team have completed in that regard. Finally, and before I'm sure Rick will want to speak, I know at the work session, several members of the council had questions or concerns about what returning to in-person meetings might look like and what safety protocols might be in place. I just wanted to mention that I believe the city will still be able to require attendees to wear masks while in the hall. And during meetings in council chambers, we can implement social distancing by spacing out seating, by providing overflow seating in the hallways and the balcony for members of the public to space out. And also assuming that the council would like to provide an option for members of the public to attend virtually, we can certainly still encourage members of the public to make use of that option and attend meetings in that manner. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions. I do see Rick Dietz here on the meeting, and he may be able to speak to some of the technology upgrades that they've been working on in council chambers. So with that, I'll stop talking and be happy to answer any questions.
Jim, you're muted.
Thank you. Must saw my lips moving. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Lucas, for the presentation. I see Mr. Dietz is present. I was wondering if he'd want to speak on some of the upgrades that we've done in council chambers or anything else with ITS.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm happy to chat a little bit about what we have done. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we knew that there would be a time when we needed to return back to operations. If not operations as normal, then somewhere between our current remote environment and our previously all in-person environment. So last year in the fall, we worked with our contractor for our audiovisual system in the council chambers to ensure that it was set up and configured to be able to conduct hybrid meetings, which is essentially have a Zoom, a digital component, but also be able to function with live participation on site. And we didn't know what that would look like, but we knew we would need to be there at some point. So in the late fall, we began that project. In October, I believe it was, we conducted a number of test scenarios there in which Stephen participated and a number of other individuals, including CATS, to ensure that the configuration worked. One of the biggest challenges with bringing all of these media together, the digital, the online, remote meetings plus live, is making sure that the audio doesn't produce unnecessary or feedback that would disrupt the meeting. And that was one of the primary functions of the equipment upgrade that we did in the room. In addition to that, that dry run late last year, we're also working now to set up another test just to ensure that the guidelines, instructions, set up and process are working as we expect them to be, and to be able not only for the council, but for other boards and commissions that will be using that space, ensure that everything is configured as transparently as possible to ensure that they will also be able to use that facility effectively for remote meetings.
Okay, thank you very, very much. Now we'll move to council for any council questions. Councilmember Boland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks for the presentation. One question I have is if, let's say that there is a meeting where the minimum number of members are physically present, 5, and the other 4 or perhaps fewer are attending electronically, and one of the members who is physically present must leave. What does the policy, does that simply mean the meeting has to end, or that somebody who is attending virtually must come in personally for the meeting to continue?
So I can take a stab at answering that. I think the answer is yes, that we would need at least 50% of the members physically present to conduct the meeting. And I will say, as a general matter, this is a new law. We've been in communication with the Office of the Public Access Counselor, who has been working to provide additional guidance to communities on questions of interpretation. So this is certainly something we could look into more and possibly reach out to him on. But my reading is we'd need 50% of the members physically present to conduct the meeting. So if we didn't have that, we couldn't proceed.
Okay, thank you. The other question I have is for Mr. Dietz. Mr. Dietz, you know that last year I asked for a solution to be able to publicly show time limits within the council chambers. Have your upgrades to the chambers included any kind of ability for people to see how much time they have to speak?
We currently don't have a system deployed that will do that in a transparent way. One of the things that we're working with Stephen right now on is additional requirements gathering. You know, in an ideal world, we would have something that would both integrate with and work in the physical environment and also work transparently online. To date, we haven't been able to identify what that kind of solution would be, but we do anticipate being able to field something physically, on site that that accommodates the needs that you described, but not in a networked fashion, but as a physical indicator, similar to a panel across the desk with lights and indicators, similar to products that we've looked at before.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? Thank you. Councilmember Scambler and then Councilmember Clarity.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Dietz, thank you for responding to that. I'm going to nudge a little bit more. You say we've looked at other commercial products. Like what? In terms of, because I think to Councilmember Voland's point, timers are going to be an important addition to this, to chambers. So what have you looked at in that regard?
So there's a number of services, some of which you've, or at least Councilmember Voland has explored, that are online timers, but our research hasn't found anything that will fuse that kind of online display within a website and within a Zoom meeting, and then also within a physical device, that can be manipulated inside of the council chambers.
So what?
As far as I can tell, that seems to be a unique business opportunity for someone out there, an entrepreneur, to try to do this. But we haven't found a solution that would work transparently in all of these different media. But if anyone on the council has ideas or has seen something that would be effective in meeting those goals, we would love to talk with you about it.
Okay.
That being said, we are able and are planning to. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I understand that we don't have a tool that will cut across all different platforms and that everybody will see, but what can we do now? Can we at least project timers in chambers, or can we at least project timers on lines? Even if they're not integrated, I'm interested in what can we do right now?
Yeah, individually, we would be able to have an online system. Again, it wouldn't be physically present, as a device within the council chambers, but could be displayed on a computer. On the flip side, there's hardware that can be placed on the dais, that would give indications about the red, green, yellow status, as well as numerical countdowns that would be visible to individuals who are speaking, physically speaking and facing the council.
And we can have that in chambers hardware in place by the time we return, or have we purchased it? Or it sounds like it's theoretically possible.
We haven't purchased it. Yeah, we've identified a number of product options, and prior to making a purchase over the past couple of weeks, we've engaged with Stephen to ensure that we're meeting as many of the requirements of that the council has as we can in the device that we ultimately end up selecting.
Okay, I have a couple more questions, but I can wait till round two.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Flaherty.
Sure, it's just a brief one. Mr. Lucas, you mentioned that each unique governing body would have its own sort of 2 meeting set maximum for meetings. I assume that would apply to Committee of the Whole as well. If the Committee of the Whole meeting is a standalone meeting, as in, let's say a member is unavailable to come in person for a 3-week span that spans a regular session, a Committee of the Whole, and another regular session. Participating in all 3 of those meetings electronically would be permissible within this resolution, or no?
I don't believe so. I don't know that the statute distinguishes between types of meetings that we hold. A work session of the council is a meeting under the definition of meeting in the open door law statute. Committee of the Whole is a meeting of the council, even though we have restrictions on the types of things that can happen at that meeting. So certainly happy to follow up with the public access counselor on his take, but a strict reading of the definition of a meeting of the governing body would mean that regardless of the type of meeting, it's two meetings.
Thank you. I actually do think of Committee of the Whole as technically separate, even though it looks a whole lot like the whole council. So that's an interesting.
We can certainly look into this. I agree that this is all new, and I'm sure lots of cities are asking similar questions. And again, I'll be interested to see what guidance the state provides. I will say, in addition to the public access counselor, AIM has been issuing guidance on this. And this resolution, in addition to mirroring both the statute, aligns with a recommended resolution that AIM has published. So we'll be able to follow up on these questions. And I also neglected to mention, the policy adopted here tonight does not have to remain unchanged. If there are things that the council learns, we could do better or we need to clarify, this can be amended. But because the health emergency at last check hadn't been extended past May 31st, the council should have something in place in the event that it's not extended beyond May 31st. So I'll be happy to look into that question, Councilmember Flaherty, in more detail.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I have a question for Mr. Dietz. Do you expect that for council members to participate remotely in a scenario where there's a hybrid meeting where there's at least 5 council members in person? Those participating remotely, do you think they would need to have additional software on their computers or not?
The scenarios that we've worked on essentially amount to an extension of the capabilities of the council chamber and the current Zoom environment. My understanding for remote participants and what we've seen in the demos, there would essentially be a participant in the Zoom meeting that is the council chambers. There may be others that are there in the council chambers, but there's one that's getting the camera feed from CATS. For a remote participant, like all of us are in this meeting right now, it would be a very similar interaction. You would log into the meeting that is publicized by Mr. Lucas, and then individuals that were attending in person would do so in person, and then the remote meeting would be accessible in the council chambers, and vice versa. Individuals that are participating remotely would be able to see the council chambers activity as a participant in the meeting.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Piedmont Smith. Do we have any further first round questions from council? Okay, before moving on, I have questions, and I'll direct this to Mr. Lucas, and maybe Clerk Bowden would care to speak on this. I was thinking about potential impacts that we may foresee on council staff and maybe even on clerk staff with managing hybrid meetings. Can you speak on that or anything you may anticipate? Understanding where this isn't, or this will be fluid for a while, the process. Thank you.
Yes, I can take a first crack at that. I don't know how much work this will involve. As Mr. Dietz mentioned, we've done some test runs, and we're looking to schedule additional test runs in the very near future to make sure that we're ready to go. But over the past year, we've essentially had one staff member who's able to manage the Zoom component, which at the moment is the entire meeting. It's not clear whether one staff member will be able to handle both the in-person responsibilities of staffing the meeting, and I guess I'm speaking from this perspective of council staff here at the moment, but it may require 2 staff members, and certainly for the initial hybrid meetings, we'll plan to have multiple staff members there. If it becomes apparent that one individual can manage both the Zoom component and in-person requirements, we'll proceed that way, but we just don't know if that's going to be possible. So it could involve essentially having 2 staff members at each meeting, one specifically there to manage the electronic component of the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure we'll be monitoring that. Clerk Bowden, would you care to respond? Impacts on your staff potentially?
I think one of the things that Mr. Lucas and I have discussed is the tracking component in terms of tracking attendance and making sure that we're adhering to the requirement that your attendance is, that you're not, that you're following the rules in terms of complying with not missing more than 2 meetings in a row in person, and that you're not missing more than half of the meetings in any given year. So through all of the activities that you are a participant in. So I think that's going to be probably the biggest thing that we're going to be looking at in terms of how we handle that, and making sure that all of the council members are communicating with clerk staff on a regular basis. But that's actually part of what you already do through city code, because you already have to communicate with us when you're going to miss a meeting or anything like that. And most council members are pretty good about communicating with us anyway. So it will just be a matter of making sure that we have forms in place and keeping our roll call sheets in a slightly different way. So I think that's what we're looking at right now. Okay, does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you for sharing. Again, I know it's fluid and we'll be monitoring as we go, but I know we've anticipated this. And thank you for sharing. Having no more first rounds, we'll go to second round questions from council. Councilmember Rosenbarger, your first round question.
Yeah, sorry, it's a late hand. I don't know. I haven't, spoken to any council members really about this and like their preference in being remote or in person. But what would we do if more than 4 council members want to be remote for a meeting? How would we decide who gets to be remote?
I'm not so sure who that's directed to.
I think it's a hard question. I mean, I don't think there's an answer for it yet, but I think it is just one of those hypotheticals, right, that could come up. And I mean, maybe we would figure out a policy for that, like if it has something with like seat order preference, or I don't know, right, who gets preference to what. I think it's just something that would have to be worked out. Yeah.
No one else to speak on it. I've talked a little bit with the clerk and Mr. Lucas, and that at this point, there is no answer that I see on there. Being fluid, I'm hoping that part of the criteria for making the meetings will kind of take care of that. With the number you can miss or not miss, have to be in person or on remote. So that may, to some extent, control who will be allowed to do remote or who will need to be in person. But I don't think it totally addresses the point you raised. So, and I, just with my conversation, so I won't speak any further on it at all. So I don't know enough about that. So good point. Mr. Lucas, do you have any thoughts on that at all?
Certainly have ideas on possible approaches, but I don't think that's up for council staff to decide. I
correct.
Agree that this may be something that council members need to think about. And if there's a suggested approach, we could certainly amend the policy to include it. But at the moment, we don't have an answer. Certainly, members planning to participate electronically could let both the presiding officer and the clerk's office know. One of the possible additional limitations that the statute itself suggests is a requirement that a member who plans to attend electronically notify the presiding officer within a certain period of time ahead of the meeting. And so that may be an approach that both notifies staff, the presiding officer of any members who attends, and also ensures that any problem with a quorum or multiple members wishing to attend electronically is spotted ahead of the meeting. So that may be a provision that council members would like to look at adding.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Thank you, Councilmember Rosenbarger. Moving on to second round questions, or I'm sorry, Councilmember Smith.
Oh, you could say it was the second round if you want. So, Mr. Lucas, what does it imply in the state statute if the member misses more than 2 in a row, must be electronic, or is electronically more than 2 times in a row, or more than 50% over the year. What does the state statute, what does it imply, or what does it say as far as what has to, what's the next thing that happens?
It doesn't really explicitly get into that. I think my read of the statute is that a member's participation in that third meeting, so after a member has participated electronically in 2 meetings in a row, the member would not be authorized or enabled to participate electronically in that third meeting. So for purposes of quorum, the member wouldn't be counted as present. Any votes wouldn't include that member's votes. Essentially, you would not be able to participate in the meeting, I think is the answer. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't exactly sure what it was leading to there. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Moving to the second round, Councilmember Scambolari.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the question you asked about staffing and staffing needs, because that was one of mine. One additional question for Mr. Lucas, just to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. If I'm understanding this resolution correctly, there's not functionally a difference between a state declared emergency and a locally declared emergency. So for example, the pandemic ends, all the health concerns are lifted, the governor rescinds the state of emergency. If we have a tornado or something, or some emergency in Bloomington, we declare a local emergency, all these rules still apply in the same way, correct?
Yes.
So that could include an emergency declared by the mayor, by the county, if there's a county health event, is that correct?
The initial set of rules that I read off that essentially allow the council to operate as it has been over the past year would apply if the governor declares a disaster emergency, or if the executive of a political subdivision declares a local disaster emergency. That would certainly include the mayor. My read is that would include the county. If the county declared a countywide emergency, I believe it would apply. I'm not sure if there would be a circumstance where the county declared an emergency where the mayor didn't, but that may be something we'd want to nail down in the very near future. But the passage or the statute references the executive of a political subdivision. So,
okay. So, but my essential question is, an emergency is an emergency. We don't differentiate in terms of rules between a state declared and a locally declared.
The rules under either an emergency declared by the governor or the executive of a political subdivision are the same.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Did I see Councilmember Boland's hand up? Yes, I did. Councilmember Boland.
Yes, this question is for Mr. Dietz. In January 2020, as president, I spoke with you about upgrades to the chambers that included the question of the Crestron tablet that is mounted on what I have come to call the executive desk in the council chamber. So the legislative desk is where Mr. Lucas and Ms. Bolden sit. The members sit at the dais, and on the other side of the room is the executive desk where staff typically sit to present. And that tablet there controls a number of things, including the shutters overhead that shut the windows and the lights and the like. The tablet, a tablet like that, I said was necessary on the dais proper, so that would sit between the president and the parliamentarian, so that they too could control the conditions of the room, and that would also be a place where they might be able to control something like a timer. Has a tablet been installed on the dais? Is there some function, some screen that will give the president and the parliamentarian the ability to manage the meeting, or is it only still available via the executive desk?
The answer to that is yes. We do have essentially a portable mobile tablet that is a secondary control panel, and that can be used at the dais or in any other place within the room.
Okay. The second thing that I mentioned was this app I'm showing you a picture of here. This app is called Multi-Timer. It's a $7 app, and I used it many times when meetings needed to be timed. They at least provided an audible signal to speakers as to how much time they had. Is this tablet that you have acquired capable of running iOS or Android apps? Or will there be a tablet that will allow that to happen?
I don't believe that unit will support that, but that's something that we'll look into. It's a specialized interface designed for use within within the overall audiovisual system that we have. I don't believe it would support escaping from that to go to a web interface, but we will take a look at that tomorrow and get back with you on it.
Thank you. The final question I have is, I understand that the dais itself has been upgraded to allow power and USB connectivity for each individual member sitting at the dais. Have those been completed? In other words, can members plug their laptops into the dais for power or for data?
Yes, I believe so. I'll need to confer with the facilities staff just to make sure that that is fully operational. But likewise, I'll make sure that that information gets back to you tomorrow.
I appreciate that. And I'd also like to know if it would be possible for a tablet or a laptop to connect directly to the system's presentation, so that, for example, if the parliamentarian wanted to run this timer app, that might solve the problem that we've been talking about for the past year and a half, if their tablet can be heard through the speakers in the room. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there is a direct microphone connection that would be live. Certainly, if the microphone near it were live, it would potentially pick up on that. We'll need to explore that scenario.
I look forward to discussing it.
We'll do so.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you, Councilmember Boland. And Mr. Dietz, I would ask that if you send written information, you might share that with all the other council members as well. Second round questions. Did I see your hand up, Councilmember Flaherty? No. Okay, do we have any other questions from council? Seeing none, we will now go to public comment. And that public comment should be on Resolution 21-7, which is on the agenda this evening. You can please indicate your intent to publicly speak by using the raised hand function on Zoom, or you may also send our meeting host a message on chat indicating you'd like to make a public comment. We'd also ask, if this is the case, that if you have more than one person on any device, please let us know to get recognized and acknowledge those public commenters. Do we have anyone, Mr. Lucas?
I did receive a comment via chat that I'm happy to read out loud while any other folks are raising their hands. The comment is from the B-Squared Beacon and reads, when Monroe County Commissioners adopted their similar policy a few weeks ago, they did it by approving an ordinance, not a mere resolution. Why is the City Council not adopting an ordinance so that this policy is a part of City Code? If the Council at some point did not provide the public access to its meetings as required under Section 7, what recourse would the public have, given that this is a mere resolution and not a local law? And that is the end of the comments. And I have not received any additional comments.
Okay, we'll give it just another second or two. Okay, seeing none, we'll return to council for final comments on resolution 21-17. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
May I ask a follow-up question?
Yes, please.
Why is this a resolution and not an ordinance?
I'm happy to address that. Many of the city's policies are adopted via resolution. Certainly an ordinance would have been an option here. The guidance that came from AIM was that cities adopt a resolution. Certainly not the intent to imply that because this is a resolution, it's any less enforceable or any less binding than something that would have done by ordinance. For what it's worth, I don't believe the county's ordinance codified their policy. I could be wrong, but I don't know that they added that to their local code. You didn't ask this, but I'll offer it up. As far as enforcement, certainly there are mechanisms for the council to direct its own staff, and so if council staff was not following the policy, there are any number of actions the council members might pursue. And then certainly if the council itself intended not to follow one of the provisions of the policy, it would have the ability to amend the policy. So we are certainly planning on hybrid meetings in the very near future and would intend to follow the policy as written until changed by the council.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Do you have any more, Councilmember Piedmont Smith? Okay, thank you. Councilmember Boland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Respecting the question I asked at first about the question that was asked about how we would decide if we have a majority of members who want to attend electronically, there are a number of options. We could go by seniority. We could go by first come, first served. We could go by coin flip. I think it's going to depend on each of us to be in direct contact with you, Mr. President, or with council leadership in a timely fashion. I would suggest that no more than 48 hours before any given meeting would be the minimum amount of time that a member ought to give if they want to have the privilege of attending remotely. But I think that, we're going to find the most equitable solution. And I look forward to seeing how that policy is developed. With respect to our ability to conduct business, I would like to impress upon Mr. Dietz at the very least that, the fact that meetings were going to be hybrid from now on has not precluded a solution to the long-standing question of timing. At the very least, it has been necessary for years that we have a convenient and visible way of letting the public, or at least audible way, sensible way, of every person in the room being able to see how much time a person has left, and that time not seem arbitrarily set. And this is the subject of the discussion I had with him and Mr. Boroff in January of 2020, when we discussed an overhaul to the chambers before the pandemic was even a concern. And there are a number of low-cost, simple ways to temporarily, at least, provide this timing solution. I appreciate his enthusiasm about trying to find one that cuts across every piece of technology, but we could accomplish this again with an iPad in the chamber and a television screen mounted on the wall that would be on a line between the president and the podium where the public speaks. If there is a screen on the wall that simply shows the amount of time left, that would be visible on CATS. That same screen could be given the treatment of a member of council and the in Zoom, so that people watching at home can see in a separate screen with the name, speaker timer, or the like, how much time is left. All I can say is I have not been able to emphasize enough how important the solution is and how difficult it's been when I was parliamentarian to try to manage or experiment with such technologies while also being a full member of council. And it continues to be, relatively speaking, a minor disrespect to members of the public when we can't provide a consistent and not arbitrary, respectful way of showing them how much time they have left. I think the meetings we had over the past few weeks over the UDO were an extraordinary example of why we need a timer solution. We've needed one yesterday. So I'm very greatly looking forward to hearing what conclusions ITS comes to in the next couple of days, because it's possible that we may find ourselves meeting in person as early as next week. And I would like to resolve this question once and for all. And I eagerly hope that ITS will cooperate with council on this most important task as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bowman. Any other final comment from Councilmember Scambolari?
Yes, thank you. I think this is quite a paraphrase for you, Councilmember Volan, but I would like to echo the sense of urgency that we have now. The rubber is meeting the road right now. And it would be helpful to me, at least, even with my relative lack of technical knowledge, if there are specific barriers, I would like to know what they are. In other words, if we can't seem to get a system in place that will allow the public to participate in the ways we want them to, or that will allow council members, it would be helpful to me to better understand what we're waiting for, what the specific barriers to action are. So I would say that I'll be supporting this resolution, but I would echo the sense of urgency that Councilmember Volan first conveyed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Scambolari. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, President Sims. I will be supporting this resolution as well. But I also am going to jump on the bandwagon with Councilmember Volan and Scambolari that we've been talking about this for at least a year to get a timer. And at this point, it's just not acceptable that we don't have one. So please, with alacrity, Mr. Dietz and the IT department, if you can't find one that cuts across all the platforms, make it a workaround, as we do in government a lot, and get it done so that people in the public can see what's going on, because it was quite difficult and it put a burden on Mr. Flaherty and Mr. Volan, whoever was doing the timing, and it made the public, it was challenging for them as well. So please get that done. It's very important. Look forward to hearing the solution forthcoming. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Final comments from any other council members? Okay, seeing none, I'll take a crack at it. In my conversations with Mr. Dietz and with our council staff with regard to timer technology, it seems the issue has been that we have technology. Some of it's compatible, some of it's not, but the difficulty is having it so that it is compatible and in line, not only with in-person meetings, but with electronic participants. We can do, as I understand it, one or the other, but the difficulty is going to be in combining both of those. And that's what I'm looking at. I'm happy that Mr. Dietz has been working on that, and I look for a solution soon. With regard to the question earlier or statement earlier about which four may need to participate or not, or how would that be decided? And as Mr. Lucas stated, that'll require further discussions. But what I wanted to comment on is that I did hear that one of the solutions would be to make sure that the president and or council staff is informed of some of these scheduled absences. I just want to reiterate that part of this tracking as far as in-person and electronic participation hasn't ever really changed, and that should include the clerk's office and our council staff, much more than or beyond just president and council leadership. And lastly, I will jump on council members' bandwagon in that I welcome this technology as well. But at the same time, I really want to acknowledge the very difficult task over the past year of our council staff in running the timers and trying to manage and mitigate that situation. I heard the word arbitrary. I'm not quite sure. Maybe if I was doing it, I might be 6 seconds late and before I remember to hit the button. Maybe that's what we're talking about. But I thought we've done a pretty darn good job of trying to manage that based on the situation we were in, and not to minimize anything at all on the needs that we have going into the future, and particularly with this new policy. So thank you. Generally that gets a rebut. Oh, I see Councilmember Volan. Councilmember Volan.
President, you said a thing
Yes.
or two that I thought deserved clarifying. You know, I want to particularly commend our staff member, Heather Lacey, who managed time during the UDO debates, which were very intense. But she was doing what she could with, I mean, if you were basically using hand signals. And, you know, like when to clarify the term that you were concerned about, the arbitrariness, my point is and always has been that if someone like me is running the timer, you know, there's a case that I could be accused of, you know, like if I can't show the timer in the room, if people cannot hear a beep, then it may, I or anybody else who is managing the timer in that analog way could be accused of arbitrarily starting or stopping the clock. And that my goal has always been to reduce the amount of arbitrariness in the way that we display timing. But first it starts with being able to time people in a consistent way at all. So any solutions that I have been seeking have been in the name of basically the effect of putting up a sign so that nobody can say we're inventing the rules on the spot, that there's a clock that everybody can rely on, that they can all see, that they can all hear, that's visible to everyone, whether they're in person or watching via Zoom, that they can see that there's this clock ticking and I or anybody else who's calling time is not making it up, okay? So a clock reduces arbitrariness, and that was my only point there. But at the time, and I am, as always, very eager for a solution that doesn't require us to come up with a different way of managing time every meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Volan, for that clarification. I will add that myself and I believe every other council member share and support the concerns that you've raised this evening, and we look forward to a solution as well. So thank you very much. Do we have any other comments from council? Seeing none, are we ready for the question? Will the clerk please call the roll on resolution 21-17?
Yes, Councilmember Scambalori?
Yes.
Sims?
Yes.
Flaherty?
Yes.
Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Volan?
Yes.
And Rosenbarger?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all very, very much. Resolution 21-17 was adopted 7-0. Now moving on to the agenda, we will now deal with matters concerning the council schedule. Mr. Lucas.
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of points here. One is obviously that we are still waiting to hear whether the governor will extend the public health emergency. Monday of next week is a city holiday, Memorial Day. So we will, of course, share any information as soon as we have it with members on any meeting requirements that might apply in the very near future. If the health emergency is extended again, I would plan on attending meetings as we have been over the last year. So stay tuned there. Another item, the city budget advance meeting that has been held annually was scheduled for this past April and was repurposed for discussion on the American Rescue Plan funding that the city is set to receive here shortly. At that time, there was a mention, I believe, of possibly rescheduling the budget advance, but as I understand it, the administration has indicated a desire to President Sims to instead report to the council on June the 2nd, which is next Wednesday, an update on the status of the city's budget, and would instead of having a separate budget advance meeting on Tuesday of next week, would like to report to the council on Wednesday during the council's regular session under the report section. So I wanted to mention that absent any sort of motion from the council tonight to schedule a meeting next week, I believe that's what the administration is planning on doing. But I know that it was mentioned earlier in April that the budget advance could be rescheduled. So happy to have any discussion on that as needed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lucas. Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, I'm just thinking through what Mr. Lucas just shared. I know that we talked about doing things a little bit differently this year, and I think part of the purpose of having the budget advance, such as it is later in the year, was to perhaps allow the administration to have a bit more clarity with regard to some expectations for next year's budget. But of course, a large part of the budget advance, as we've traditionally run it, includes council members expressing their interests and thoughts on what could or should be included in the coming year's budget. And I'm wondering if that would still be a part of the anticipated discussion on Wednesday during the reports section, and if that would be done after the administration shares its report, or are we looking at a different mechanism to sort of accomplish that this year?
Is that for me or you, Mr. Lucas?
Both, or either one.
Well,
yeah.
Actually, my understanding is that they will present and we'll have 3 reports that evening. And as you know, we normally allot 20 minutes total. So that'll take a little bit longer. But it is my understanding that after the presentation, then the next step would be to generate questions of the sort you just mentioned that we will submit to the office of the mayor and city staff. And there will be a certain amount of time, I believe a week or so. And then they will have some time in order to respond to us. And part of my discussion is that I expected that response to our questions to be by the 15th of June, which is just before our recess. And although that's not carved in concrete or carved in stone, that is the basic what's next, that as I understand it. Is that your understanding as well, Mr. Lucas?
I think
similar. I mean, it's not exact. I mean, this will be fluid as well.
Well, and certainly, again, if the administration has additional thoughts, they can share them next week. But I believe their comments have been about the unstructured nature of the budget advance in past years, and wanting to have comments, suggestions, or questions in writing from council members so that they can sort of have a more structured ability to receive those comments, to have time to think through them and respond. And so I think what the administration is hoping for is their ability to present a status update to you all I think comments during the report section next week might be possible, but I think what they're hoping for is written comments, suggestions from you all so that they can take those, think about them, and then respond in writing at a later date.
Yeah, so the goal is to have a different approach this year for council members to communicate their sort of budget preferences, and that will not be done on Wednesday, as was sort of more traditionally done with the budget advance. Is that an accurate characterization?
I will, of course, defer to Council President Sims and the Mayor's office, but
I will say that there is some accuracy to your statement. I will share this, and I want to thank Councilmember Scambluri from an email some time ago with budget questions. And the gist will be, one, that you could describe the areas in the budget that you would like to see increase by dollar or percentage. And next, you can describe areas in the budget that you would accept decreases in spending to balance the increases you outlined above. And those would be two of the bases to generate questions from council and suggestions and desires, frankly. And also with what may appear to be the lateness of this budget advance, the April meeting really was more of a formality, but we didn't have very much information which to base questions or comments on with regard to revenue streams. And although all of them aren't exact or known now, we're a lot closer to knowing what some of those revenue streams may be that we're looking for, close enough that I do believe our controller has a good idea as far as possibly predicting until all that's finalized. So that was the goal, I hope, of moving in that direction.
That's very helpful, and I can yield. I just one small follow-up, which is that perhaps either you, Council President Sims, or someone from the mayor's office could email us or send a document to the council members maybe ahead of next week, whether part of the packet this Friday or something else, sort of detailing that high-level overview of how we expect things to proceed, since it is different than in years past. I think I and probably other members would find that helpful.
Thank you. I think we can do that. Thank you. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, one other difference I see in the proposed process is that the budget advance was a public meeting, whereas I don't know if the written comments we would send to the mayor and the responses from the mayor's office would be public. Is it your understanding that they would be or would not be? I mean, they're all subject to a public records request, but you know what I mean, like actually posted somewhere.
I hadn't really, I guess I had assumed they were, since they were last year and included into our budget processes. Now, they didn't come until later, until we got into the budget process as part of the packet, as I remember. And I'm not so sure if that answers your question or not, but that's, does that answer your question?
So they will be public?
Well, they have been every year I've been on the council. The question, I think, is maybe when. They might be part of the actual department head presentations as responses to those questions as part of that documentation, if I'm recalling correctly.
Well, I don't see this as parallel to what we normally do in August. I see this as something that we're doing instead of the budget advance.
This is something we're doing instead of in April.
Right. Okay. Mr. Lucas, or can you shed any light on this?
You're absolutely correct that these would all be public records, and certainly I had planned on publishing these. I don't know that we specifically asked the mayor's office if they had any reservations about that, but I think Councilmember Sims or President Sims is right that in the past, when there's been a written exchange with questions posed by council members and then responses provided by the administration, those types of things have been included in the materials and published online. So certainly my expectation was to do something similar with these.
Okay, thank you both.
Thank you, Councilmember Piedmont Smith. Very good question. Councilmember Volan.
Just to follow up on that question, Mr. Sims, the idea is that we're simply publishing our question or our comments on the future budget, and that's in addition to the questions we're going to ask after budget week. In other words, there's going to be basically 2 rounds of written statements and questions from members, one now to say what our priorities are, and then one after budget week when we file written questions that we've been doing every year as well, and the administration eventually answers them.
I think that's fair to say, yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Thank you. Mr. Lucas, anything further on council schedule?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move adjournment.
Second.
All right, thank you. It's been moved in second. Everybody have a great evening, and thank you for a productive meeting. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Oh, happy holidays to everyone.